emerging markets are rising to the fore, rapidly growing, nimble, dynamic. In the decade ahead are the likes of Mexico, Nigeria, Pakistan, Philippines, and Turkey tipped to lead the emerging market growth in the way the BRIC nations once did. Can they become the new engines of global growth? For how long will their stars shine? Despite a decade of extraordinary growth, the journey to economic maturity is never an uninterrupted upward course. The journey of the BRIC nations has shown us that. Emerging markets will rise, others will fall, the old guard replaced by the new. But for all emerging markets, this year will likely further illustrate the road to economic development remains long and winding.
So that gives us a very good indication of some of the challenges for 2013. We intentionally set this debate up to have a mixture of those from the BRIC economies, of course, but also from the next 11 fast-growing developing countries. I'd like to start with Nigeria and Governor Sanusi, in fact, because of the rise of Nigeria. The last 10 years, spectacular average growth of nearly 7% compared to the previous decade of some 3%. Now, the big challenge, as I noted in my report there, is trying to sustain that sort of growth. Is it difficult to manage that with the lack of infrastructure that you have now in Nigeria?
Well, yes, in the medium to long term, it will be difficult to sustain without deep structural reforms. A lot of the growth has come from the domestic market. It's come from agriculture in particular. But agriculture has grown through increased factor intensity, not through increased productivity. And we've got to have a transformation plan that improves productivity of agriculture. There's a limit to how much you can use land and labor to continue adding agricultural production. And we saw the impact of that with the last floods last year. The floods basically affect agricultural growth and then slowed down GDP from 7% to just over 6%. The outlook for the oil sector, again, is not too bright in the medium term with increased self-sufficiency in the United States. Therefore, we do need to fast-track structural reforms in the power sector, in the oil and gas sector, moving into petrochemicals, and the agricultural sector moving up the value chain. If we can do that, we can move actually into double-digit growth, and it can be sustained for a very long time.
Double-digit growth, you're suggesting? That's very interesting.
If you think of this country in the last 10 years, this is a country that has grown at 7%, generating only 4,000 megawatts of electricity. So imagine what would happen if we started generating 20,000 megawatts of electricity. Manufacturing is only 4 or 5% of GDP because of the lack of poor infrastructure. If that improved to 20% of GDP, you can just imagine the outcomes of that. So we're coming from a very low base in terms of infrastructure, in terms of the enablers of growth. Power, petrochemicals, we still import our energy even though we're an oil-producing country. Build your own refining capacity, build your own petrochemicals industry.